Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. I'm Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today we'll talk about the 5 keys to being an effective hybrid manager. Now, the future of work is clearly hybrid. When we talk about the impact of hybrid work on job satisfaction, there was a survey of 5,300 people by VMware, which found that 82% report higher job satisfaction with hybrid work compared to office-centric work. And 56% of hybrid workers report increased productivity compared to their in-office work. 55% of hybrid workers report increased collaboration compared to full-time in-office work. Research by Zippia finds that 74% of US companies are adopting a permanent hybrid model of some sort, with at least some people coming to the office only some days a week. Now, the future of work is clearly hybrid, but middle managers are not very well prepared for hybrid work. We see high burnout in middle managers. So a Future Forum survey found that 43% of middle managers report burnout. 43%, that's nearly half. And that's a higher demographic than for either top leaders or rank-and-file workers. The burden of implementing policies in hybrid work is a major source of burnout for middle managers, because the executives, they make the policies. And I help 24 companies figure out their policies for hybrid work, how work with their leadership team to figure out hybrid work. And if I wasn't there to facilitate implementation, they just make the policy and they'd leave the implementation up to the middle managers, which is not a good approach. So I do not advise companies to do that. I advise them to work and train their middle managers on how to do the implementation effectively. Middle managers don't have prior experience with hybrid work, so they naturally do what comes just naturally to them. They apply office-centric management to hybrid teams. And when they try to shoehorn this office-centric management into hybrid work, it doesn't work very well. And then they feel burned out because the results don't meet their expectations. Hybrid management requires a distinctly different approach. It differs. It is not the same thing as office-centric management. And there are 5 keys I want to emphasize for hybrid management success. 1, intentionality, not automaticity. 2 is trust, not paranoia. 3 is autonomy, not micromanagement. 4 is connection, not presence. And finally, 5th is accountability, not FaceTime. So those are the 5 principles we're going to discuss. Now, you have to understand that hybrid work involves a context shift challenge. Managers, as we do all, naturally go on autopilot throughout their activities. This usually works well when we're driving a car. Most of the time, when it's not a dangerous situation, it's good to go on autopilot because we are just going to be so preoccupied with driving. Otherwise, it's like the first time we're driving, right? We do not want to do that, except when the context changes. When you need to, let's say, enter a highway, or you're leaving a highway, or otherwise, when you're trying to do something different, when you're maybe trying to figure out your way, and the GPS is not giving you the right direction. The context has changed, and you need to figure out what is different when the context shifts. That's when you need to be intentional, not autopilot. But our brain, unfortunately, is poorly suited for changes in context because of what's called the status quo bias. It's a tendency to stick to what we know, what we're comfortable with, the status quo. And so managers naturally want to return to what's comfortable for them. The dynamic in the pre-pandemic environment when they knew how to control and manage things. Another problem is functional fixedness. It's kind of like the hammer-nail syndrome. When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you learn one way of functioning, everything seems to be that appropriate way of functioning. So let's say when you learn one way of leading a team, then you apply that leadership methodology which you learned in the office to hybrid teams. And that doesn't work very well. So managers using office-centric methods in hybrid work is not great, and they end up ignoring better solutions specifically adapted to hybrid work. This is a serious problem. So these are 2 cognitive biases, the status quo bias and functional fixedness, which I see as the biggest problems in hybrid work. So let's talk about the first one, overcoming management autopilot, the shift to intentionality. Middle managers must be trained to recognize context shifts and find the best methods for the new environment in which they find themselves, and accept that it will not be comfortable. They have to be accepted that it will be uncertain, that they will lack control, they'll lack confidence, and that's fine. That's what happens naturally in the new environment. You don't have control, you don't have confidence, you have uncertainty. Middle managers don't like that. I mean, nobody likes that, but especially people who are in management positions, because they're supposed to be the ones who are in control. They're supposed to be the ones who know. They're supposed to be the ones who have confidence. But the first step to making good decisions and figuring out how to work well in hybrid context is admitting that you don't know. Your previous experience has not prepared you for this new context, and you need to learn new ways of collaborating, of leading, of managing. Okay. Not paranoia. Productivity paranoia is a term that was used by Microsoft researchers who found that 85% of leaders, including middle managers, lack confidence in employee productivity when the employees are spending time working remotely. So this lack of trust leads to what Microsoft researchers called, quote, productivity paranoia, unquote. So the leaders fear that there's lost productivity due to not observing their followers. In fact, however, research shows that there's a large productivity boost for remote work. 5 to 10%, it's huge. There's been very clear increase in productivity in the US since the start of the pandemic. So very, very clear boost in productivity since people went remotely. But unfortunately, since there's been a forced mandate return to the office, there's been dropping productivity. So you'll see that US productivity shot up in Q3, Q4, Q2, Q3 of 2000 and started going down in Q1 of 2022 as the return to office mandate started taking place, which is not great. So that is an indication, of course, that productivity is higher with remote work. And you need to be really thoughtful about why you're asking people to come to the office. You need to address the trust issues that middle managers have. It's difficult for them to trust employees when they're not observing employees. And that's another cognitive bias that we have to deal with, that I have to deal with often when I talk to middle managers, called the illusion of control. There's an overestimation of control over external events. That's what the illusion of control refers to. So it's prevalent in more authoritarian managers who have a tendency to micromanage, and they believe that in-office presence means productivity. But research shows that in-office employees actually work much less than 8 hours a day. How much time do you think they spend working? Only 36 to 39% of their time, according to various studies, are spent on work. The remainder is spent on non-work activities. So you need to really trust employees to work when they're working remotely, because extensive research has shown they're more productive when they work remotely. Middle managers need to learn to trust employees that expectations of performance will be met. And showing trust very clearly leads to better performance. There are certain things that are done better in the office, like collaborative activities, more intense forms of synchronous collaboration, mentoring and training, socializing, nuanced conversations. But for productivity, which is for individual tasks, overwhelmingly it's better done at home for the large majority of people who have a normal work from home, well set up office. Now, the middle manager's desire for control is unrealistic. It goes against the principle of autonomy, which is very important for knowledge workers. Autonomy is critical for productivity, engagement, and innovation for knowledge workers. It's best done through intrinsic motivation. So we best do our best work when we're intrinsically motivated. And that comes from having autonomy. There was a study of 370 companies that shows that more innovation comes with autonomy rather than less autonomy. And a survey by Metis found that 80% prefer independence or high level of autonomy at work. This is about knowledge workers. So very, very clearly, people have a preference for it, and research shows that it increases productivity, engagement, and innovation. Job satisfaction, morale, engagement, therefore retention. Autonomy in the post-pandemic environment means flexibility and self-control of work location and time. So the best approach is to give flexibility to the entire team and let the team determine its approach. Then they will figure out when to collaborate. That's the time when they need to be in the office, when to do mentoring, when to do on-the-job training, when to do socializing, when to have nuanced conversations. A Gallup survey showed that 46% of employees are engaged if the team determines office policy, versus 35% of employees are engaged if office policy is determined by the leadership. So that's a huge, huge improvement. That's nearly 20% improvement. So this is an over 20% improvement. So this is really great. Now, one thing to keep in mind is connection. There's a challenge of team connection in remote work. So the research on remote work shows that you have stronger relationships with your colleagues on your team, and you have strong connections between team members, the same thing found by a Microsoft study, but you have weaker cross-functional connections to people on other teams. So this cross-disciplinary innovation is hampered by remote work. So hybrid contexts require an intentional connection and cultivation for those cross-functional weak ties, so that you have better cross-functional collaboration, which is important for innovation for major projects. To build weak ties, it's beneficial to have in-person events, happy hours, volunteer activities, training sessions with more than one team in there. Then have remote social activities like video game sessions, virtual escape rooms, other sorts of virtual activities that are building weak ties across the company. And connect junior staff with senior staff through mentoring. That's an effective way to extend the network if you make sure that the mentors are not part of just the immediate team of the mentee. It gives junior staff on-the-job training, which is a major challenge when people spend time working remotely, and it improves their integration into the organization, which is another big benefit for people when they spend time working remotely. Now, another thing to think about is how do you evaluate your people? The traditional staff evaluation relies on face time. This is not great. So this annual review is based on interactions, how the leader feels about how much time their team member spent in the office. It's vulnerable to what's called proximity bias. 42% of supervisors report sometimes forgetting remote workers, and remote staff are 15% more productive according to one study, but the same study found that they were less likely to get promoted even though they were quite a bit more productive. Equating face time to accountability and productivity and performance is a bad idea. So effective hybrid evaluation means accountability, not face time. Focus on meaningful goals and outcomes that advance a team's business objectives. And then don't focus on time spent working. Focus on those meaningful goals and outcomes. So have weekly one-on-ones that include performance evaluation. Most good managers already have weekly one-on-ones. Maybe you might have bi-weekly if you have someone who works a lot of their time independently, or in a managerial position, you might have 1 month. Let's say you are a middle manager, you have a number of lower managers under you, you will be meeting with them maybe once a month or something like that. I see that tendency in companies I help transition to figuring out their hybrid work. So but weekly is the general tendency for teams that need to collaborate together more intensely. So agree on 3 to 5 key goals for the week at each weekly one-on-one meeting. Then, on the next meeting, report on the progress, coach the supervisee on problem solving so that all team members know where they stand. So that's really helpful. When a supervisor, team lead meets with their team members once a week for managing performance, as well as other things, that once a week meeting sets 3 to 5 weekly goals, then at the next meeting goes over the 3 to 5 weekly goals, coaches them on problem solving if they didn't accomplish some of their goals, great, and then sets 3 to 5 goals for the next week. It really helps team members know where they stand and gives them psychological safety. So, to recap, how do you thrive in the future of work? There are 5 keys to effective hybrid management for those middle managers: intentionality, trust, autonomy, connection, and accountability. So these are the 5 keys to being an effective hybrid manager, and I hope you found that this episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show beneficial and valuable for you. Make sure to subscribe wherever you check this out, and leave a review. It helps others discover the show, and it helps us improve the show. Alright everyone, I hope to see you in the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.